Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Tariffs or taxes on Americans, on Louisianians.
The nonpartisan push against Trump's tariffs.
This is early, not extra.
Government maneuvering amid a shutdown.
Suddenly they have to find a new way to cope.
With one door closing, finding an open window. Hi everyone, I'm Andre Morrow. Much more on those stories in a moment on this week's edition of SWI. But right now, the Revenue Estimating Conference panel failed to give a unanimous vote for a third straight month. House Speaker Taylor Barra on Thursday gave the no vote on the four-member panel, their latest meeting. He insisted he is being prudent and not just simply blocking Governor John Bel Edwards from including a teacher pay raise in his budget proposal. Now we'll look at other headlines across Louisiana. Efforts to boost the state's big tourism industry has Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser reaching out even more to international visitors. Travel and tourism is the fourth largest employer in Louisiana, generating about $1.8 billion a year in state and local taxes. Nungesser says about 47 million visitors came to the state in 2017, with Mardi Gras, our food, and diverse culture the biggest draws.
We saw a 37% increase last year in international travelers to Louisiana, second in the country. And that's why we are venturing out to see more international markets coming to Louisiana. And we're researching a lot of data to see what are the best places we should market.
The UK and Germany, with nonstop flights to and from New Orleans, are the lead European markets. Plus, China has legions of travelers who Nungesser says take long trips and spend a lot of money. Crumbling mortar has forced the state capitol to erect a steel-covered walkway to temporarily protect people from falling debris. The Advocate reports the state does not have the $40 to $60 million needed to fix the 88-year-old 34-story building. The walkway will allow the Capitol's main entrance to reopen next month. Built in 1931, the state says not much maintenance has been done since. The Capitol is a National Historic Landmark, and that designation allows the temporary structure to remain in place up to 5 years. GOP businessman Eddie Rispone says he's running for governor because he disagrees with Democrat incumbent John Bel Edwards' whole approach to running the government, from his cabinet picks to his financial policies. He criticizes the governor's approach to education and stabilizing the state budget. This is Rispone's first bid for public office, though he worked closely with former Governor Bobby Jindal on workforce development and education overhaul. State Democratic Party spokesperson Eric Hall says Rispone's support of Jindal shows he's out of step. The Mississippi River is flooding from Vicksburg to Baton Rouge, saturating already soggy levees and sending wildlife scrambling to higher ground. This view of the river is this week from Natchez and from Vidalia, which is more than 2 feet above flood stage. The good news is the river is forecast to crest through early next week and then begin a rapid fall. The Rolling Stones are among the headliners for Jazz Fest in New Orleans and its 50th anniversary this spring. Organizers confirmed that Mick Jagger and his band will play. Also headlining are Katy Perry, the Dave Matthews Band, Al Green, Aaron Neville, and gospel great Shirley Caesar. Producer Quint Davis says this year's festival will include at least 20 tributes honoring artists who helped shape the city's musical landscape, like Louis Armstrong, Fats Domino, and Pete Fountain. The festival runs from the last weekend in April to the first weekend in May. The week began with a visit to New Orleans by President Donald Trump. He stepped off Air Force One along with state political leaders, you see Congressman Garrett Graves here, at Armstrong International Airport, and was on to the Morial Convention Center to greet the American Farm Bureau Federation. There, he made a quick nod to the Saints, an NFC championship win away from a second franchise Super Bowl.
But you have to say Drew Brees, he's one hell of a quarterback, and that was a tremendous game. And so congratulations to the folks from this area and from this great state. It's a great state.
His focus, though, was on the border wall and illegal immigration.
We're going to have a wall. We're going to have a barrier. We're going to have something that's going to be very strong. The crisis of illegal immigration impacts all Americans, threatening public safety, overwhelming public resources, straining our local schools and hospitals, undermining U.S. workers, and claiming countless innocent lives. And I will tell you, I want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. They have to come in through a process.
He spoke of his great fondness for farmers and of trade negotiations he said would be great.
We're doing trade deals that are going to get you so much business, you're not even going to believe it. Your problem will be, what do? We need more acreage immediately.
The president never talked specifics about how great things would be and did not mention how current tariffs had hit farmers in the state and nation hard. Outside, Trump protesters numbered in the hundreds, and one mini float depicting a Napoleonic Trump paraded the streets. Dr. Charles Boustany represented South Louisiana in Congress for more than a decade. He was in New Orleans at the Farm Bureau event. He was there, of course, when the president spoke, and he has teamed up with a non-partisan campaign called Tariffs Hurt the Heartland, opposed to the use of tariffs. Dr. Boustany joins us from Washington to talk about his concerns for the state farmers, and new tariffs have cost Louisiana businesses and residents about $85 million since they began late last fall. Dr. Boustany.
If you look at what's happened in Louisiana, the full effect of tariffs began at the very end of September of last year. And so far to date, basically by the end of October, we have seen about $85 million in tariffs on Louisiana businesses and farmers. That's basically taxes. Tariffs are taxes on Americans, on Louisianians.
Why would we be taxing ourselves like that in this trade disagreement?
You know, these tariffs are paid by our farmers and by our manufacturers who depend on the supply chain of imports coming in that they need to use, whether it's steel, for instance, that needs specialty steel needed in the oil and gas industry, certain chemicals needed in chemical manufacturing or in plastics manufacturing. These are taxes that we are paying. And that's just one state, Louisiana, $85 million as of the end of October, plus $39 million in what we call retaliatory tariffs. These are tariffs on Louisiana on goods that we export to other countries. So these other countries have put retaliatory tariffs on what we're trying to send over there to those countries.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you about the soybean farmers, for example, impacted them in particular.
What happened with China in particular is that they basically excluded our Louisiana soybean products and American soybeans from going into China. And what happened as a result now is that you have soybeans that have been harvested, soybeans that are in the field that could be harvested, and there's no market for them. And they filled up the storage fairly quickly. We don't have a lot of storage in Louisiana, and when the storage fills up, there's no place to go. And so the soybeans rot in the field.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So we've had Louisiana farmers who've had to just plow over areas of soybeans, acres of soybeans in the field. That's not very productive.
No, you hate to see that.
Right.
And that's direct damage too, but there's collateral damage also.
Well, we talk about a collateral damage because tariffs are taxes, and it's hurting the American economy. And we've seen a number of farm bankruptcies around the country, farms across the country that are not bankrupt or under stress. We've seen a number of family-owned businesses in the seafood industry, for instance, and in manufacturing that have been hurt. These are businesses that have gone for several generations now, and now they're struggling. And some of them are on the brink of bankruptcy as a result of these tariffs.
Dr. Boustany, what is the solution then, and what are you telling the president if he's got an open ear to you?
Right. Well, the tariffs basically, they are taxes, and they hurt commerce, and they're not having the kind of impact we need to see on China. And I say that because our exports are down 40%. That's hurting our economy when we need to be expanding exports and opening markets. That's number one. And secondly, what has happened is we have not stemmed the tide of Chinese goods coming into the U.S. In fact, the trade surplus that the president likes to talk about and condemn constantly has gone up more under these tariffs than it would have without them. And the fact of the matter is, this is not working. This is a policy that's not working. Now, we have a problem with China, and the president's right about that. But tariffs are not going to solve that problem. The problem that we have with China is it functions as a non-market economy. They use all kinds of state subsidies. They steal intellectual property, but tariffs aren't going to address that problem. And in fact, the deal that the president keeps talking about is a deal that will get us back to where we were before he implemented the tariffs.
Are you confident that your group, Tariffs Hurt the Heartland, that your voice will be a voice that the president will hear?
I'm very confident that this is the most impactful voice in the country today on this, because it's built off of grassroots activity. We have held town hall meetings in more than a dozen states and communities across the country, and we're continuing to do so. We're hearing stories from people who are affected by this. This is heartland America. We're not talking about New York and San Francisco. We're talking about in the heartland of the country, people who have been hurt by this government policy, these taxes imposed on Americans, which are restricting trade and the opportunity to open markets. And it's not solving the problem with China. So what we need are policies that are targeted to dealing with the difficulties with China, but that open markets for U.S. farmers and manufacturers.
Dr. Boustany, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this, and all the best with the program, Tariffs Hurt the Heartland. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Stay tuned. There'll be more to come.
It is day 28 of the partial federal government shutdown. How is it affecting people in our state, though? Marquita Garner-Walters, Secretary of State Children and Family Services, is here. Also, Jan Moeller, Executive Director of the Louisiana Budget Project. You're a government watchdog. Yes. Marquita, let me begin with you. Learned this week that food stamps have been handed out for next month already.
Correct.
So what made that decision happen?
The federal mechanism that pays for food stamps needed to spend that money by January the 20th. And so we had to give the benefits out early, and we've really been trying to help people understand this is early, not extra. This is no extra money. This is their February allotment. They just got it earlier than normal. So this money that has now been loaded onto their cards has to last them all the way through the month of February.
Okay, and then into March. Then
maybe into March,
we'll
yes.
look at how that goes at that point in time. There's a ripple effect here that people may not know. We'll talk about that in just a second. Jan, what are you hearing from people who were impacted by this and workers here in the state?
Well, you know, there's been a lot of news about Georgia Pacific and 300 jobs cut. There are 6,000 federal employees in our state who haven't drawn a paycheck for almost a month now. They've lost an average of $5,000 in pay, and that doesn't count all the contractors who aren't direct federal employees but who work in federal buildings, janitors, cafeteria workers, people who support the federal workforce who also haven't been paid. And so that's money that's not being spent in grocery stores. They're not buying clothes, they're not eating out. So the economic ripple effects have already been felt. They're going to continue to be felt, and I think they're starting to get worse. We heard this week that over 300 federal employees have already applied for unemployment with the state, and that number is certainly going to go up if this continues much longer.
Can they draw unemployment?
Absolutely. If you're unemployed, you can draw unemployment.
He talked about ripple effects, but there's a different type of ripple effect that you have information about.
The TANF program, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, is a congressionally appropriated bucket of money. And that reauthorization for that act ran out right before Christmas. So the House took up a bill Monday that extended it until the end of June. And if the Senate acts on it, then everything will be fine. If they don't, TANF pays for all sorts of things in our state budget, like our preschool kindergarten program, like child abuse investigation, drug courts, CASA programs, all sorts of programs that help people that are in need and help move our government forward. And if that money is not reauthorized, then it's a double whammy to the state.
Now, Senator Bill Cassidy has been working with other leaders in making sure that people who have been called back to work, there are government workers who have been called back to work during this stage, like TSA workers, for example, are being paid, because people may not realize some have been called back to work, but they're not being paid because of the shutdown. To me, that doesn't make sense. But there's a call to make sure that that pay goes out. You think that's going to happen?
Well, there's an easy way to make sure they get paid, and that is to pass the appropriations bills that fund the government. I don't know how you can make sure these workers get paid without actually passing the appropriations bills that have passed the U.S. House of Representatives. The deadlock is in the United States Senate, so Bill Cassidy, John Kennedy have it in their power right now to go tell Mitch McConnell to let there be votes on these bills.
Do you see anything happening soon? Because there's no apparent thing even at this hour that something is going to change this and the shutdown will end.
We've not been given any information from our federal partners that they see any movement on this at all.
I think we have to remember how many families in this state are just a couple of paychecks away from insolvency. Even middle-class families, if you have children, the expenses add up very quickly. So a lot of federal workers, they're middle class, but they don't have enough savings to last maybe more than a month or two. And so if they're not hurting very badly right now, they will be very soon. And again, there's a lot of people who haven't gotten paid who are below that sustainability threshold and really are hurting right now because they haven't been paid since before the holidays.
Hey, we'll stay on top of it. Thank you so much for being here to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Georgia Pacific's decision to stop producing office paper at its plant in Port Hudson will mean the layoff of about 650 people, and it has experts adding up the losses. The LSU Ag Center economic model, for example, says the ripple effect could impact almost 2,800 jobs across the state and into Mississippi, and nearly $188 million in labor income. Again, that's a ripple effect. Just over a decade ago, when International Paper closed its mill in Bastrop, it cut the heart out of the northeast Louisiana city. Dr. Jim Richardson is Director of Public Administration at the Ourso College of Business at LSU, and will be stepping down this year from the State Revenue Estimating Conference. It'll be 32 years you've been there, but you still got a little work to do there to finish up this next estimate, right?
Well, I still have a couple of months I have to work out.
Right, so we've talked about that briefly. Well, let's look at the impact of Georgia Pacific, and when you look at the numbers, what do you see in tax revenue loss, income loss, lost to the region?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you look at is you had 650 people who've worked there, some of them for as many as 20 plus years. It's a new day for them. And these are people like families that have house payments or rent payments to make, car payments to make, children in school, all sorts of things. Suddenly they have to find a new way to cope.
Right.
And that is tough. They have maybe for 6 weeks there's unemployment insurance that will help carry them, but it will not replace their salary dollar for dollar by any stretch of the imagination. So you have that going on.
And this is in an area that you might say the economy is a little more diverse. It's in a region of Metro Baton Rouge and into Southwest Mississippi, but at the same time, the impact to those small cities right around there, Zachary, Port Hudson, some of those towns.
Well, that will be felt, obviously. And there's no doubt that this particular case of Georgia Pacific is different from a regional perspective that was International Paper up in Morehouse Parish, because you got two very different communities there. There are other job opportunities for some of these people there. However, they'll have to make a change, probably travel a little larger distance to work, or working with a new boss, a new set of people, learning new skills, possibly all sorts of little things going on like that.
Well, when we talk about the ripple effect, though, for example, it's not just the fact that they're going to not make paper products, but who supplies the paper, for example, the timber people, the truck drivers, et cetera.
Well, see, that's part of the ripple is that the workers, we focused on the 650 workers, and that's a very important group, but there are a lot of other inputs that go into making paper. For example, they use a lot of utilities. They use all sorts of different services potentially to contractors. And you talk about transportation issues of bringing paper or bringing the pulp or the timber in. So there's a lot of things that you really can't count very easily, but very quickly they add up, and this is how the ag economy has got close to 2,800 jobs, counting the 650 jobs at Georgia Pacific. But that ripple effect, and in East Baton Rouge Parish, it will kind of spread out a little bit. It will not be quite so noticeable at one spot, except obviously in Port Hudson. And I think the real element in Port Hudson, there are going to be some little grocery stores, some little maybe some restaurants, all sorts of little things there that depended on them, as well as the tourist business that goes up there and things like that. But I think those are the ones that can't just pick up and move.
If you have a small business, exactly, you mentioned whether it be a sandwich shop or a grocery store that depended on all these workers, you don't just pick up and move from that.
You know, because you have a physical location. Whereas obviously as a worker, I can at least look around. I may have to drive further for my job. I can find alternatives. This little store is going to have to find almost a new location, which is very costly.
What about when you look at the tax base for the region? How does that impact it?
Well, obviously you talk about 650 people, and the average salary at a paper mill is about $60,000. Obviously there's a variation there. That's about $40 million of people buying retail goods, various services, going to entertainment places, things of that nature. So suddenly that starts affecting those people. And it depends on where they all live. If they all were concentrated in one area, and we don't know that for sure, then obviously it'd be a much bigger impact. If they're kind of spread across the parish or actually into other parishes as well, then the impact doesn't show up quite so enormously or quite so dramatically as it, say, in Bastrop you're talking about.
Bastrop, for example, the population has been in decline since the 1970s. Since the 1980, almost 5,000 people have left, and that means only a little over 10,000 are left living there. So that's a huge chunk of a population that once was there, once was vibrant.
Vibrant because of that international paper mill only.
Right, exactly.
I think here you find in Port Hudson, you have, this obviously is the big manufacturing part of Port Hudson. They do have the tourist attractions. They do have the certain historical things that go up there. But I think probably most of the people probably were spread out. Could be in Zach, could be in Baker, could be any number of places. It could be in a different parish even. Right. And that we don't know the location exactly.
But we do know it's going to be a big deal. It is already, but the true impact will be felt once the layoffs actually happen.
Yes.
The shutdown happens and this division is no more and people don't go into work anymore.
That's right. It will be, and then it will. It's one of those businesses. It's unfortunately in a small town that is looking for a big factory, one factory, that is as good as the economy supports that type of production. And obviously, Georgia Pacific has made a market decision that what we're doing here is not selling anymore.
Jim, thank you so much for all your information on this.
Thank you now.
All right. Now, 2 other manufacturers in the Zachary area have announced shutdowns. Chemical giant BASF will close its Zachary manufacturing plant in April. That's 54 jobs. They say they are working to find employees jobs at other BASF sites, including the big plant in Geismar. And Thompson Pipe Plant, that employs 120 people, is consolidating operations into the North Texas town of El Dorado. They are offering those 120 jobs there. The governor's $114 million plan to give teachers and support staff salary increases this year was further muddied with that failed vote that we mentioned at the top of the broadcast to increase spending by the REC. Well, this month, Louisiana Public Square explores the teacher pay raise proposal, including funding options and how it might be distributed.
So if we could give one level of advice to the state, it would be to, when you do this compensation increase, give districts some flexibility to prioritize that investment in whatever their local need is, as compared to mandating from Baton Rouge that it's an across the board or one investment in one area or another. What we hear from employers and families across the state is there's a need for math and science teachers almost everywhere. Job requirements are becoming more math and science oriented. We need to raise our ability to bring in new math and science teachers in the classroom.
Louisiana Public Square and the Value of Teachers airs on Wednesday at 7 p.m. You can learn more online at lpb.org/public square. And everyone, that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. You can catch LPB News and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.